This map shows the location of Bronze Age activity. It also shows just how wide the Thames was in comparison with today's river. It should be noted that not all the tributaries are shown on this map. The vast majority of all the find spots of activity follow along the lines of the rivers, and this activity includes single finds, settlements, field systems, cemeteries, and monuments. Within the museum's collections, we have more than 800 objects that have come from the Thames. There are also artifacts in other museum collections as well, so this figure is on the small side. These objects are bronze swords, spearheads, knives, and axes. But why are all of these in the river? I think the explanation may point to the spiritual significance of water. Rivers may have been seen as points of connection, not just with the wider world. And we can see a lot of movement of people and the exchange of goods and ideas with the continent at this time. But it might be also more spiritual. It may also be a connection between death and life, a route into the underworld. Water as a life giver, but also a life taker. The river was sometimes peaceful and productive, and at other times violent and unpredictable. Could these objects have been offerings given to appease? During the late Bronze Age, there was a period of climate change with rising sea levels, flooding the adjacent land, and also taking access to fields and other valuable landscapes. People responded using physical measures by building revetments and trackways to try and still maintain access. But did they also use spiritual measures to metaphorically fight back the waters? Coming forward in time, this time here we are in the 1st century, and the Romans recognized the value of the Thames and its tributaries, specifically the Walbrook. The Romans built Londinium on the banks of the Thames with the Walbrook in the centre and flanked to the west by the Fleet. They forded the Thames and built a bridge across in the location more or less where London Bridge is today. This reconstruction image was drawn by Richard Sorrell and gives an aerial view of the city. You can see the Fleet in the bottom right-hand side, down here, and just make out in the centre the Walbrook as well. The reconstruction of Southwark is wrong, and at this time it was a series of large islands, but bear in mind that this reconstruction was drawn in 1975, and our thinking and our knowledge around Roman London has changed a lot. The Romans initially used the Walbrook for drinking water, but they also located a lot of industry on the banks, industry such as tanning, metalworking, things that needed a great deal of water. But it also ended up polluting it to such a degree it was no longer drinkable. And in fact, it stank so badly that the focus of housing, especially for the wealthier, shifted to be away from the smell. However, the spiritual side of the river persisted. Temples were also built along the banks, including the Mithraeum. And this statue that you can see on the right-hand side of a river god was found buried in the vicinity of the temple. We also have found from within the Walbrook small figurines, brooches, and curse tablets, and it's thought that these may have been deliberately thrown in by people as they crossed over the bridges of the river. So now we move from the Walbrook to the River Fleet, and here we can see 4 maps which show the evolution of the river, and this is one of the rivers that's just to the west of the City of London. So you can see that the river was large, it was tidal, and had 2 small islands within it. The Romans used these islands for warehouses and a watermill. And then during the 12th and 13th century in the medieval era, the Knights Templar narrowed the mouth of the Fleet and they built a mill. This affected the flow of the river. This, combined with other water changes, meant that the river and the channels around the islands were silting up. This area of London was a focus for industrial activity with the accompanying pollution and disposal of waste. It was in such a state that Alexander Pope described it in 1728, to where Fleet Ditch, where disemboguing streams, rolls the large tribute of dead dogs to the Thames. Archaeological excavations prove some truth to this statement, as the skulls of dogs and cats and even a dog's collar was found in the river. If I return to these maps, we can see that there were efforts in the early 18th century to improve the river, and it was canalised, but this again was not maintained and behaviour didn't change. It continued to be an open sewer, and so it was partially covered before being fully covered as part of Bazalgette's sewer. At the other end of the River Fleet, there are a number of springs that feed into the river. The spring water was believed to be good for the health, and spas were built for those with enough money to come and take the waters. This is a view of Baden-Twell's gardens, created around 1780, where people would stroll in beautiful surroundings, drink the water, enjoy the fresh air, and generally trying to improve their health. The Fleet reveals the 2 sides of London society and the abuse and and the use and abuse of the rivers. It wasn't just the River Fleet that was polluted so spectacularly. This is the River Neckinger that flowed around Jacob's Island. This illustration was for Dickens's novel Oliver Twist, but it is a fair reflection of the place. Sorry, I can't speak, but it's a fair reflection of the place. Charles Dickens was fascinated with the underbelly of London, and he drew attention to the people that were living in these conditions. Jacob's Island was a centre for industry, including lead and flour mills, which polluted the water. People were living on this island, and they were also throwing their waste into the water that they used for cooking and drinking. Jacob's Island became known as the very capital of cholera by the late 19th century. Here we have a song sheet from 1850 titled The Lamentation of Old Father Thames, and it shows the putrefied Thames as a common sewer, captioned, "Here's a mess I am in." All of this was building up to the Great Stink of 1858, when Parliament was so affected by the stench that change happened, and they authorised the Metropolitan Board of Works to begin the new network of intercepting sewers designed by the board's chief engineer, Joseph Bazalgette. It was completed in 1875. Hang on, let me just change slides. There we go. And after this, there was not another outbreak of cholera. In this plan, you can see in red the pipes that were built to run underneath the Thames, connecting up and carrying the waste out to the pumping station Abbey Mills. And here we can see in this painting by John O'Connor, painted in 1872, it shows the newly built Victoria Embankment. This was a huge change to the shape of the river, as over 22 acres of land were taken from the river and added to the city. Now I come into the 20th century, and the Thames we can see being used for recreation. This photo, taken by Henry Grant, shows a beach that was created at Tower Bridge and was incredibly popular. It was opened in July 1934, despite the fact the Thames was still heavily polluted. In 1957, the Thames was declared biologically dead, and it was described as a vast, foul-smelling drain with no oxygen. Improvements in the late 1960s to London's sewage system brought improvements, but it was also helped by the changes in the 1970s to the river's environment, creating more natural habitats and regulating pesticides and fertilizers washing into the river. The river thrived with increased species returning. However, here we are today with sewage still flowing into the river after heavy rain. And also the changing modern climate brings into sharper focus how we manage the rivers and the potential to work with nature rather than fight against it. So here we are, present day, and I'll now hand over to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. What a fantastic overview to get us started, and some fantastic images there, as well as some very important references to historical developments. If we can save questions until the end of the presentations, that would be great. And please don't forget to use the Q&A panel or the chat function if you want to share any information. I'm going to hand over now to Grant Waters, who is co-founder and director of an organisation called Tranquil City, who will bring us up to date, really, because Tranquil City are an environmental data analytical organisation, whose mission is to democratise environmental information to promote healthier lifestyles. And CPRE London have been working with Grant and Tranquil City in recent times to see how we can explore the concept of tranquility as it relates to London. And Grant, I think, will explain that a bit more and tell us how that relates to rivers and watercourses. So over to you, Grant.
Thanks, Neil. I hope you can see my screen. Is that okay? Great. Hi, so as Neil said, I'm Grant, co-founder of Tranquil City. Thanks for the intro, and thanks for a lovely presentation, Kate. It's really interesting to hear about the history of the rivers and just know a bit more about how they come to be where they are now. So great cities generally can support us to live healthy, balanced and fulfilling lives. And our vision for Tranquil City is for everyone to have access to environments that enable them to lead healthy, balanced and environmentally aware lives in cities, because at the moment, some people have that ability more than others. So we work collaboratively collaboratively with others to develop people and nature-centered approaches to city making, engaging the public in that process and encouraging healthier choices. One of those elements that we all need to be healthy and balanced is space and time to experience a sense of tranquility. And tranquility is something that we all crave sometimes. Experiencing it on a regular basis can be immensely good for us. It's especially important in our cities, where we're exposed to heightened pressures, stress, and chaotic environments. And it's something we all should have access to for when we need it most. And it isn't something just available in the countryside. It's an experience that those growing up in the city should be aware of, understand the benefits of, and have as easy access to. So tranquility, in my own words, is a state of calm, rest, and gratitude experienced somewhere in between our mental and our physical worlds. So it's inherently connected to nature, as nature provides us with a mental break from often man-made stressors. And there are a couple of theories as to why this is and why this provides this mental break. And one is that contact with nature provides a rapid positive effect of blocking negative thoughts and emotions. And another theory is that how nature provides us with effortless attention that helps us to restore from fatigue induced by minds or tasks, mental tasks that are focused, such as work and family life and transport and just our daily lives generally. But our connection with water obviously runs deep, fundamentally reliant on survival, as Kate was mentioning, as our city is orientated around that. But it has so many other health-giving properties specific from nature in general. Water bodies are a regulating force. As with nature in general, water bodies help bring us out of our everyday lives and provide a mental break away from the stresses in the ways that previously mentioned. But water has a number of important qualities that I believe help it regulate and ground ourselves and provide that spiritual connection that Kate was mentioning. So water is slow. It provides us with mental stimulation that is slow and it has a calming effect. It provides us with stark contrast to busy and chaotic environments and can bring us into our present moment. Water is constant. It doesn't change so rapidly as much like other elements we're exposed to in our urban environments. But even at the micro scale, flowing water can provide us with a moment of constant energy that can be restorative and good for our well-being. Obviously, water is life-giving, and obviously there's controversy in terms of the statement whether the Thames is biologically dead, but nature is abundant around healthy water bodies, and London was built around rivers, a source of transportation and obviously life. It's an easy place for us to experience nature, even in the city, as generally these spaces are away from big roads and obviously built up areas, such as this one in southwest London. So water is much bigger than us as well. So unlike spiritual connection, it helps us experience a sense of awe and wonder at the natural world. It can in itself help provide mental restoration. But studies have also shown that this sense of awe and wonder can actually increase pro-social behaviors in a study that was conducted by the University of California in Berkeley. Another aspect that creates deep relationship between us and water is how we experience these qualities through our senses. So watching water bodies flow or slowly ripple provides a gentle, soft fascination, which research suggests can be restorative and allows our minds to wander. Listening to the sound of flowing water has also been shown to help us recover from stress quicker compared to noisy urban settings. And contact with outdoor water bodies, such as while swimming, can benefit mental and physical health. And early research in the sort of growing area has shown that immersion in cold water can boost dopamine levels, can increase the release of endorphins, and can help bring us into the present moment again by the sheer fact that we're connecting our body and mind by the sheer coldness of the water sometimes. But water typically brings us away from the busy urban settings too, inherently helping us to escape the most polluted and congested area of the cities, and provides that sense of constant, on our doorstep level of escape that we crave sometimes with our quite stimulated environments. But early in our formation of Tranquil City, we realized that lots of data out there is created in silos with various environmental parameters separated so that we can't really read them together. We read them in isolation. And this is not how we experience our environment. It's not how even environmental issues are actually caused in the first place, usually from one source and going over to multiple environmental parameters. And it's definitely not how they're resolved either. So we decided to create data that explores people and nature-centered approaches of experiencing the city. This is our Tranquil City Index, and that's actually shown on our Tranquil Pavement map that highlights the places and spaces that have the potential to provide mental restoration and good health and well-being. So it combines a number of factors empirical evidence has shown to provide mental restoration, such as water elements, high quality green space, woodland, tree cover, lower noise levels and air pollution. As opposed to typical environmental maps, our Tranquil City Index highlights the good areas. Actually show you sort of zoom in into a particular water body that I quite like, which is up in North London, the east and west reservoirs near Stoke Newington, Woodbury Down. You can see here our weighting shows that when you're close to areas that have, it's actually quite high sort of forestry areas as well as the water connection. This is a wild swimming area too, that our Tranquil City Index really highlights this area, which has good access to in terms of walking and cycling. But it's not very far from a very polluted road, and even just 5 minutes walk away, you can access very green, tranquil areas that are screened from the main road and busy pollution. So this is something that everyone can access. And we're also in the process of creating it for other cities such as Bristol. But this data helps us understand and plan strategically how we can improve access to water bodies and that provide that sense of tranquility. And this is something that Neil was mentioning that we're working on together to look at tranquility inequities. So, and how we can help improve areas in most at-risk areas of London. So working with CPRE and Tisdall Associates, we're using this data to work with the community to identify key areas that are highest need for tranquility and elements that could potentially reduce these inequities across the city. So this map actually looks at socioeconomic information regarding population, this one specifically population and health deprivation, and highlights the areas in red, obviously, that are most in need. And if we're comparing two different areas here, one of Richmond and Barnes and Hackney and Tower Hamlets, mainly this is Tower Hamlets. But what we can sort of start to identify is firstly, we need to focus on areas such as this in order to improve access to water bodies, but also where potential tranquil areas do exist in these areas that we can help promote, improve, protect, improve, and improve the access to as well. So generally, just to close off, I've got some few ideas on how to improve tranquility and access to water bodies across London that will obviously improve tranquility for many in three sort of key areas. So to identify and protect and restore, not pave over areas of running water, for example, like the Surrey Canal, which was paved over quite a few years ago because it was polluted and dirty and near industrial areas. We can actually protect and restore them and also improve the diverse access to water. So it's not just walking alongside it, it's actually swimming, which obviously we'll get on to our later speakers today. So build community around and engagement with local communities to help restore these together. It's something that we can all build that connection with our local environment by doing that. I think it's not something that we just want organizations to come in and improve. It's something we really want to build and network with people who live in the local area to help improve them. And it's really important that we build that connection to these spaces to help and care for them in the future. And three, and to focus on the promotion of nearby water elements and benefits to people and communities most in need. As we're saying, maps such as what we're working on with CPRE and Tisdall Associates will hopefully help do that and work with other organisations which will to help promote that to those people in those areas and hopefully help everyone and more people to experience tranquility in the city. And as I mentioned earlier, water bodies and tranquility can help provide that sense of awe. They can increase pro-social behaviours and altruistic behaviour. And for us, those of us who are lucky enough to live close by or regularly use water elements, let's hopefully use this sort of increase in the altruistic behaviour to exponentially increase the amount of people who can access these positive spaces in the city. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from Theo and Toni on ways that we can practically change our local environment for the better with the local community. So thanks very much for inviting me for this.
And thank you, Grant, for a really interesting fascinating presentation and bringing us up to date really in terms of the potential health and well-being benefits of water in London, from Kate's references to the awful diseases and problems of the 19th and earlier centuries, right up to how we can make better use of what we have for health and well-being in terms of our mental health. I think it's a really vital issue, 21st century issue. Okay, without further ado, we're going to move on. We have some questions being posed in the Q&A panel. Thank you for those. We'll come to those in a moment. Please keep on posting your questions there. But first, we're going to take our third speaker, Toni Guiver, who is a founder of a fantastic relatively new wetland scheme, Firs Farm Wetlands, up in Enfield in North London, which was started, I think, in 2014 as a charity. And I think what Toni will be able to do is to illustrate some of the points that Grant just ended up with in terms of a way forward in London in terms of restoring and improving our wetland and riverscapes. Over to you, Toni.
Thank you very much, Neil. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Toni and this is Helen Osman. I hope you can see our screen. Bear with us, we're novices at this, but we're going to have a good go at it. So welcome to Firs Farm. We're so pleased to be invited to take part today. And as Neil has indicated, sorry.
Toni, can I just interrupt, because I'm seeing a screen with a relatively small image.
You need to go to.
You might want to change your settings, but it works for me. So
You want a full screen, don't you?
Full screen, yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, and then start slideshow from the beginning, top left of your screen, I think. Top left.
Slideshow from beginning.
Okay, you can do it. Yeah, from beginning. Yeah.
I do apologise. Is that working now?
You still need to start from beginning, so start slideshow. Don't worry, we've got time. Top left of your screen.
More. Not showing top.
You can stick with that one. You've come out of shared screen now. Please bear with us. Some apologies about this, but we'll get there.
Show. Yes, is it? Has it come up? Is that showing now?
Yes, we've got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, carry on. Thank you.
So apologies for that.
That's okay.
Okay, we want to tell you a story of how Lost River, the Moor Brook, tributary of Thames Brook, one of the most polluted rivers in the UK, has been daylighted here, creating a natural blue and green wild space and a much valued accessible local community asset, and how we hope to continue to develop it for the benefit of all the community. Next slide. Hopefully this has gone on to the next slide for you all. Located within 4 wards, joining up some of the most deprived and most affluent parts of the borough, which is quite a powerful statement, especially when we're talking about levelling up around communities these days and what these blue spaces mean to people. It has gone from this exciting journey began in 2014 with a muddy field used by a few dog walkers and footballers with no changing or toilet facilities, as these had all fallen into disrepair. In just 5 years, it's been transformed into an award-winning wetlands. It has been a close partnership between the council, the Environment Agency, Thames Water, Thames 21, and the Friends of Firs Farm, who undertake most of the maintenance of the wetlands and wider habitat, tree planting and fundraising.
From the very beginning, there has been a lot of community engagement. Firstly, to create awareness of the site development and to encourage people to participate in consultations using social media, local press and online resources, to start to build footfall. really from a handful of, maybe one day we actually only recorded 8 people in the visiting site, to now several hundred a day to raise and to raise funds. And over this short period of just 5 years, First Farm has achieved a number of accolades for its community engagement, as well as the rewilding of the river. So we came up with this acronym, HERBS, which we use quite widely in our pitching, as we feel it really encompasses everything we've achieved and what we hope to achieve in the future: health, education, recreation, biodiversity and sport. So now what we want to do is take you through a brief journey through HERBS, beginning with health.
This wonderful blue-green space now attracts people from a wide area to spend more time outdoors. It is accessible to all, has a 1-mile trail around First Farm, which can even be used by people with limited mobility. Sorry, I'm struggling to speak today. It's somewhere to switch off, take the children out to play outside, just enjoy the wildlife or to exercise. And during COVID, as you can see from the family group walking here with their masks still on, it has been a place to actually escape to. And during the whole pandemic, it's been a bit of a life-saving place to go to for many people. Going forward, as the facilities improve, we hope to take this a step further by working with GPs and the North Mid Hospital, which is nearby, on opportunities for using First Farm in social prescribing and other health initiatives. First Farm is now an educational resource within easy reach of 12 schools, some of which have special needs. Teachers say it's a valuable curriculum resource. Its usage is now growing with out-of-borough schools and colleges, U3A and other community groups. Council's keen to understand how First Farm has been developed. It's also been something that they have enjoyed sharing with and boasting about from First Farm, from the Enfield Council. The Zoological Society of London came along this year for the launch of the Urban Wetlands Design Guide. Dragonflies and Damselflies of London, published by London Wildlife Trust, and Sinky Cities programme have also all taken a great interest in what First Farm has to now offer with its new blue and green space. It's a great platform from which to encourage healthier rivers and what we each can do to improve our watercourses, in particular understanding what misconnections are and the importance of checking our own plumbing works, because they all end up there if we don't. We start young with ages from about 3 and 4 upwards with our Eco Club, as they are the future, as you can see in the pictures below. We teach them about rivers, the wildlife and pollution, and they take part in many exercises with the water quality testing, pond dipping, surveying the ponds and wildlife. We have created on-site and downloadable resources on a host of topics.
Recreation. It's all about bringing people together with a little help from the friends, but in actual fact, it's been a great deal of help for the friends and local volunteers. We have an amazing band of volunteers who are passionate about it and prepared to give their time and money into creating resources. This is just a small selection of some of the things we've done in the past. We've had 2 major festivals. We also celebrate National Children's Day, which will be restarting next year. And the top 2 pictures show the fairy castle from Christmas, and the one just a couple of the wonderful resources created in our children's woodland area. There we have downloadable resources for people to take round, and next year in the past we've had as many as 400 children taking part. It may even be more than that. Sorry, I've probably got the wrong number here. Taking part in some of our Halloween events, which will be restarting in a bigger way next year. So lots of trails, lots of opportunities for scavenger huts, cloud watching, soundscapes, all sorts of things. And on this next slide, we just wanted to give you just a very, very brief overview of some of the activities and events that now have taken place, some organised and some just resources that we are funding in First Farm, and people absolutely love it. Go to you, biodiversity.
Comment that we had just recently, and these are the words of an 87-year-old ex-resident who lived by First Farm since his birth in 1934. He said the streams and ditches had gone along with all the wildlife, because at that time the streams had been filled in, culverted below ground, and the ponds had been filled in. So sadly, the loss of nature had such an incredible improvement on local residents. This particular resident and his family moved away as they had lost the brown owls, skylarks, hedgehogs and cuckoos that they enjoyed and inspired them to set up a nature club, which had all gone away. But on a recent visit to families still in the area, he was overjoyed to see the return of the water and nature brought back to First Farm. He is now a regular visitor, as his family are. So another fan club for First Farm. You can see on this slide the numerous newly created or recently created habitats. The planting of more than 1,000 new trees in First Farm has resulted in a fantastic return of nature, which includes some red data species, song thrush, missel thrush, starling and house sparrow. Yes, we have some twitchers around in First Farm. Water voles and slow worms of course protected by the law like swans, interestingly, and many dragonflies can be found enjoying the wetland stream and pond areas. The wildlife has inspired many locals to take up photography, wildlife spotting, volunteering, thank goodness, because we need lots of volunteers, and many other activities.
So coming on to sports, just 1 second, just checking the time. Bear with me 1 second. Oh, make sure we don't overrun. So currently we have an underutilized sports field. There is some football. The tennis club, new tennis courts, they were recently relocated. We have table tennis, but there are plans afoot to actually develop sports on First Farm. It's been included in the council's green and blue strategy, and also the playing pitch strategy, to quote the council, a world-class sports hub for Enfield, bringing blue and green together. And this we're hoping that will be developed in the course of the next few years. And finally, the next chapter for First Farm. What we want to do is create a sustainable future for the wetlands. We want to redevelop footfall, but in order to do that, we need to develop facilities. We need toilets and we need a cafe, and we're actually hoping that we have one of the first changing places toilets in the whole of the borough, which basically enable people with special needs, particular needs, to be able to spend more time there. A planning application has been submitted on this disused to build a community hub from containers. This is the first will be a temporary resource tomorrow, which will be developed to create a flexible space to really sort of to move everything we have described already, to help secure a commercial revenue stream for First Farm.
We are so grateful for the fact that the council and the many groups that were involved in this project have brought the blueness back into First Farm, because without that, it would not have brought a lot of people together and given them a safe space to go to. Thank you for listening.
Thank you ever so much, Toni and Helen, for that fantastic illustration of what can be achieved with community effort and engagement in a relatively short space of time. I think I'm definitely inspired by that story, and I think you've demonstrated quite how local action can help improve London's sort of blue environment for people and nature. Thank you. We have one final speaker now, who is Theo Thomas, who is the founder of London Waterkeeper, which is a river charity which uses advocacy to challenge water pollution in London. A very active and very effective campaigning organisation it is as well, I think. Theo, over to you to perhaps talk to us a bit more about the challenges facing those that want to improve the quality of water in London for health and well-being. Over to you.
Indeed, you can hear me okay? Is that all?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Just going to hide my own face as I find it very distracting. So yeah, this is, it's an interesting week in terms of the kind of issues around access and how do we increase access. And from looking at some of the people that joined today, obviously, and the presenters, access can be physical, it can also be psychological. And there's a lot of people who think that, say, the River Thames is dirty all the time because it's sort of a silty kind of colour, a brown colour, and that doesn't mean it's dirty, that just means it's a very silty river. It's quite fast flowing, but also there's a lot of agricultural land further upstream of London, and it has that. There are chalk streams that flow to the Thames, but the Thames itself is not a chalk stream. Chalk streams obviously flow very clearly. So historically, as would have been touched on, we had a different sort of relationship with the river, and people were very attracted to it, and that sort of changing back to that perhaps in more recent years. London Waterkeeper is very much about trying to increase access to rivers, all rivers, and also to make the Thames fully and truly fit to swim, which is knowing when it's polluted and when it isn't. After sort of 5 days or so of dry weather, then the Thames has excellent bathing water quality. But the places you can get into the Thames, they're either safe or where people think they are allowed in, are very, very few. So there's a lot of work to be done there. But knowing when it's polluted and when it's not is part of unpicking all of that. And of course, some of you might have seen that in recent times, I'm just going to try and, there we are. You might have seen that the first and only river in the UK was getting bathing water status is the Wharf up in Ilkley. And that was a long and very effective campaign sort of waged by the people in the Clean Ilkley group. And by getting it made into a designated bathing water, then that meant for the first time it was going to be given water quality testing once a week between May and September. That happens at all the beaches that have bathing water status in the UK, and in London that happens at the Serpentine and at the Hampstead Ponds. And you can go onto the Environment Agency website and see what the water quality was. And for Ilkley, it was interesting. So this was the site that was first chosen, and it overall is fairly good water quality compared to other areas. So E. coli on the left and enterococci on the right, those are bacteria, sewage bacteria in the guts of all mammals, and they're indicators of how much sewage is in a river. You can get high readings if you have a lot of, say, geese or other wildfowl at a water body. But if you're taking a water test from somewhere near a sewage treatment works or outflow, then you can pretty much rule out that, and it gives you more information in terms of what the pollution levels are. So the this was one of the sites that was first tested, and it is upstream of where the sewage treatment works goes into the River Wharfe. Now, the Clean Ilkley group had to make a really strong case and persist, because they wanted water quality testing downstream of the sewage works as well, because people also swim there. This is the upstream site, which is the most popular, but downstream people swam as well. The red line indicates the bare minimum, so it's not good water quality. It's pretty poor even at this site. But downstream, it's even worse. Every test fails the bathing water standards. So if it stays like this at Ilkley for 5 years, it will lose its bathing water status. Water quality doesn't affect getting bathing water status for a site. You just have to prove it's popular, and that involves getting lots of photographs and surveys and questionnaires over a year during the swimming season between May and September. And if you can prove that's met, and you have the landowners, in Ilkley's case, the council's permission, then you should get bathing water status. And it's obviously a big precedent that's been set by Ilkley getting it in this stretch of the wharf. But yeah, after 5 years, if the water quality still breaches the limits, then it will lose it. So Yorkshire Water has said that it is going to make a big effort and look to reduce that, and it's doing a kind of a study, and is promising investment to reduce the amount of pollution that comes in, which is obviously fantastic. So that meant that that generated news headlines that sort of said that it has the poorest water quality of a bathing site in the UK, and that's exactly what Clean Ilkley wanted, because that made something that they knew had been a fact for years and years and years public. That data empowers those people to be able to say, well, actually the water quality is as poor as we've been saying, and that should hopefully drive change. So this is a successful campaign in terms of using the legislation as it stands around bathing water to really advocate for change locally, and to get the Environment Agency and the water company sort of linked into this sort of approach that has to be followed in terms of improving water quality. And of course, around Europe, there are countless, so many different bathing spots that are obviously on the coast, but significantly on this map, the inland ones are the ones on rivers and lakes. And we don't have very many on lakes in the UK, let alone rivers. But in France, 573 rivers have bathing water status. And this map, of course, doesn't show France, but it shows Northern Europe, and climatically pretty similar to the UK. So if they can do it there, we can surely do it here. So it's not a sort of an alien land that is being used to compare with what we could have in the UK. It's just across the sea. And of course, in terms of what Grant was saying, then it's not simply about having places that you can swim. It's important that we have better access to places that you can walk alongside water, or if you might want to go in for a little paddle up to your ankles. But in London and in lots of places, the rivers, plenty of rivers are not big enough to go for a swim in. You might be lucky to get up to sort of mid-shin, but nevertheless they shouldn't be polluted. And if they are polluted, then that's going to be something that's going to put people off, and so that reduces access and reduces the the ability for people to find these tranquil spaces, and also to encourage other people to use them. A good example is the Olympic Park wetlands. Just in the distance, you'll see the Olympic Stadium, and this is a big, as large as a sort of a story of size of kind of almost half a house. This metal sort of drain that goes into the Olympic Park, into the wetlands. So the wetlands were built as part of the green legacy, and they do look amazing, but this is really just a sewage delivery channel. So when it rains enough and the sewers overflow, Leighton's sewage and rain comes out of this and goes down that channel, which is grey and stinks and is littered with sanitary waste when it rains. So that clearly is peculiar that that's happening in somewhere where £9 billion was spent to create and deliver the Olympic Games. And that kind of shows that's the way that we treat rivers. We use them to put sewage into, and it's that culture that really needs to change. We need to shift that massively, because this is the system working. This is the design that was put together for the Olympic Park. You've just got to the north on the top of the map. This is the velodrome, and then just below you've got the pipe going sort of top right to top left, and then into the wetlands, into the channel that was created. And the brown arrow symbolizes, you can probably imagine, a mixture of rain and sewage. When it rains, it comes down this pipe underground and then comes out into the wetlands. And that is the system working perfectly, exactly as it was meant to. Nothing is malfunctioning there. That is great. And it even specifies on the, if you kind of go into the outfall structure, it says the length of the protection of the bed might have to be increased because the velocity of the sewage overflow might be so great that it would scour the bottom out. So they had to put more kind of concrete and metal and stuff under there. So really well designed, and the perfect way to get large amounts of raw sewage into the Olympic Park wetlands. That clearly is a very, well, not even a 20th century. I think Bazalgette would be dismayed that we were essentially using the same technology that he developed more than 100 years ago, and that we haven't come up with something better. In fact, what we've done, as Grant touched on, is we've paved over large parts of London, and so it's made it even worse, even less climate resilient. So you might have seen the coverage last Thursday. An amendment went from in the Environment Bill into the Commons that was voted down. It wasn't successful. Government asked its MPs to vote against it, and they did. And so it's coming back into the Lords on tomorrow. In fact, Lords Amendment 45, and that is that's going to be a massive opportunity to, for this country to, for England to set a new standard. The amendment has been slightly adjusted, so it would insert a duty on water companies to take all reasonable steps to ensure untreated sewage is not discharged from storm overflows into inland and coastal waters. So that's going to be at the Lords on Tuesday. They will put it back into the Environment Bill, which has lots of other amendments, which also some of those didn't get through. It will then go, we think, back to the Commons on Thursday. So we need 33 MPs to decide that they don't want to continue giving water companies the right to discharge raw sewage into rivers and into the coast, and instead vote to effectively bring that to an end over time, which you think would be quite a good idea. Lots of those MPs are, pretty much every MP has either a river or coast in their constituency. And we will see, what happens. But we're asking people to put pressure on their MPs and to vote for that amendment. Now, it is correct that the law does say that that sewage overflows should be limited. So this dense looking text is from the Urban Wastewater Treatment Regulations. So that's UK law. That came from the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, which came from the European Union. We're no longer part of that, but this regulation is still UK law and we should be abiding by it. Now, it does refer to stormwater overflows, but it just says the limitation of pollution of receiving waters due to stormwater overflows. It's very dry language, but it's incredibly important. So that is open to interpretation. What is limitation? And clearly we're not limiting to the degree that this legislation hoped that it would. And the reference to that storm overflow should only overflow in exceptional circumstances isn't in the urban wastewater treatment regulations or in the directive that talks about limiting, nor is it in the Water Industry Act 1991 that talks about water companies having to have a sewer system that works well. Well, you could interpret that as clearly it has been, as what's happening in the Olympic Park wetlands. That's working perfectly. Every time there's a bit too much rain, that sewage ends up in the Olympic Park wetlands. So if you look at the 2012 ruling by the European Court, which obviously the UK is no longer subject to, and the Environment Bill has is to create the Office for Environmental Protection, and we want that to be as independent as possible in the same way the European Court was, so it can hold the government to account. And there are amendments in that to try and make that happen, because if the Office for Environmental Protection is too weak, then we won't be able to enforce other laws effectively. But in 2012, what is on screen now is part of the ruling of the European Court, and that says that there should only be overflows in exceptional circumstances. So it is there, it's in a court ruling, but the Environment Bill would tighten everything up and shift that culture. And we would have this was the Kenwood Ladies Pond Association going out for a swim. So if we can, in the Thames at Richmond, so if we can get this amendment passed, 33 MPs just need to shift and switch their vote in favour of it, then fundamentally we change how things work. Now, there are some who will say that we have to have sewers overflow to rivers because it stops things backing up into people's homes, or it's going to cost £600 billion up to. No one knows whether that figure is accurate or not. And to kind of use the excuse it stops backing up into people's homes isn't really credible anymore. So if you look at, and this is my last point really, if you look at Margate, and I was lucky to be able to go there in one of the weeks where the sewers weren't overflowing this summer. The week before and the week after they did, so that might have been me and my family swimming in sewage. We didn't have to, but that shouldn't be exceptional. But Southern Water's got a big sewage pumping station there that blows quite frequently, and people had a demonstration at the weekend to say this shouldn't be happening because this is going to deny people access. People won't want to go swimming if there are regular sewage overflows. And Southern Water have said, right, okay, well, we're going to do a investigation into the surface water that's getting into our sewer system around Margate. So every time the water industry says, or the government says, that it's going to cost too much, or it's to stop it back up in people's homes, they don't know. A lot of people have said, well, why hasn't Southern Water done this investigation? Why didn't it do it years ago? It should know how its infrastructure works. And the truth is, water companies don't. And the Environment Bill, as amended by the House of Lords, if that gets through in the Commons, that will shift the culture and will fundamentally underpin all the other laws that stand and make those easier to enforce as well.
Thanks very much for that, Theo. Really important debate, and a very topical debate, as you say, a very live debate at the moment in Parliament, and something that if we're not already taking action on, I would encourage everyone to consider doing so. And I think what you've done is to illustrate quite how challenging this agenda is, really, with all of the different political forces at play. So we've got a bit of time for Q&A. Thank you to those of you that have already posted questions in the panel. We'll come to those. I think we'll be able to deal with them all. I'm going to try and do this firstly by starting off with some of perhaps the questions focused on particular points for clarification from the speakers. And we had one question, I think it was from Catherine Kirkbride, who was asking Grant, I think, to explain a bit more the data points that he used to illustrate the points he was making about the Tranquility Index that Tranquil City adopt. And then the second detailed point was one I think really more for you, Toni and Helen, which is a question from, who was it, Vanessa Hampton, who was asking what water quality testing do Furze Farm Group undertake. And once we've dealt with those, we'll come on to the other questions that are perhaps more substantive and more discursive in their responses. Grant, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. I'll just quickly, thanks, Catherine, for your question. Hopefully you can see the screen there. Just to describe a bit of the data points. So each of these little green dots is showing the Tranquil City Index. So that's our combination of multiple different factors such as noise pollution, air quality, with this presence of green space and what quality that is, so what type of green space that is, also looking at tree cover and the percentage of tree cover as that's linked to restorative effects as well, up to sort of 50% cover. And then there's also the access to the water element, so the proximity of that. So every 20 meters, we have a data point. So you can see at a very high granularity across London what is your potential experience of tranquility. So that's what you can zoom in, have a look at your area. You can type in the postcode here if you want to look a bit closely to a specific area. But also these leaves here are the crowdsourced spaces of what people have shared to our hashtag Tranquil City London over the years that show, okay, I've experienced tranquility here. So you can sort of see clusters of that across different areas and parks. This is Finsbury Park here. But the key thing about the Tranquil City Index is the inverted color scale. So the more green, the deeper the green, the more potential it has for tranquility. And as you can see here, it goes to the main road, it goes white. So the point is that it emphasizes the positive rather than the negative, if I can get my words out.
Thanks, John. That's very helpful. I hope that's answered your question, Catherine. Do come back if you want further clarification. Toni, you were going to look at the question about water quality testing.
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, I don't have the data here with us today, and I'm not the expert, but we do have a local ecologist and a graduate student who studied environmental sciences, and they are the ones that actually carry out water quality testing for us. Especially when we're doing pond dipping events, etc. They are carrying those out. The EA come on a regular basis to carry out water testing, and we have a link to them where we can report any pollution problems that we come across.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, please keep the questions coming. We've got a few big ones here though that I'd like to get to, and I'm wondering whether perhaps Kate might want to chip in with a historical perspective here. So a question from Chris Roma-Lee, who really the nub of his question is, will Londoners ever be able to return to the Thames for a swim? But he does say that perhaps swimming in the Thames isn't going to be possible due to it being a busy waterway, but floating pools can work as is experienced across London. And he reminds us that, of course, or some of us who may already know this, that the Thames had a Charing Cross baths in the 1850s. So this isn't a new concept, but one that is critical to a healthy city, surely. So, Kate, I don't know whether you want to have a go at that, and then maybe Theo might have some thoughts as well.
I think it's a really good aspiration to have, to be able to get the Thames clean enough that it is swimmable in. I think there is the fact that it's a working waterway, and so there's a huge amount of river traffic. And as you know, we're constantly trying to get people out of cars, off roads. There is a drive to look at increasing the river traffic, like the clippers and things like that. I mean, there are problems inherent in that, but I don't think that should necessarily be a barrier to being able to have either areas or specific events when it would be possible to swim in the water. And I think it would be really great to have that opportunity for people to engage with the city in a very different way. I think what Grant was saying about how important access to water is in terms of physical as well as mental health, of that is absolutely paramount.
Thank you. Actually, I've just, I think I've successfully allowed Chris, who was the person who posed this question, to speak if you wanted to, Chris, if you're still there, to illustrate the work you're doing with Studio Octopi on this issue. Can you hear me? Are you still there? You might want to unmute yourself if you are. No, I don't think Chris is there at the moment. Anyway, Theo, did you want to respond to this?
Yeah, I mean, the Thames upstream of Putney Bridge, you are allowed to swim in it. It's downstream of that the Port of London Authority doesn't allow it for very good reasons. The speed of the river and, as Kate said, the amount of traffic, and Chris. So downstream of that, it would be tricky, and also you would get hauled out as well. Some people do swim at Hammersmith, and that happens quite regularly. And I know that Simon Griffiths from Outdoor Swimmer Magazine, he's on here. He swims in West London, Richmond frequently too. So it does happen. I think with climate change, with temperatures rising and everything getting hotter, then more people will do it. So there's a risk that people will do it in the wrong place at the wrong time. And obviously Copenhagen kind of sussed this about 20 years ago, and we're kind of that far behind, really, I would say. In places where it is too busy, then yeah, you could do what Copenhagen done, and have floating swimming pools. That's obviously something Chris at Studio Octopi is very keen on, and it's hard to shift this cultural sort of bias we have against swimming in our rivers, I suppose. But yeah, I think that it has to be done safely. It will take time to establish it, but if we don't, I think people will do it anyway.
Yeah, I think that's clearly evident in parts of the Lee Valley on a hot summer's day in the Lee. Actually, Simon Griffiths, who Theo just name checked, is in attendance. And Simon, if you feel like you'd like to contribute to the discussion, I've just allowed you to speak, but don't feel you're obliged to do so. We have a couple. Oh, Simon,
can you hear me if I speak?
I've got you. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great. Because yeah, I still tried to get Chris on here, but I don't know if he. Anyway, yeah. So thanks very much for the invitation to speak. It's been fascinating listening to the history and of the Thames and what Grant was saying about Tranquil City, and while we were on, I was even looking at Furze Farm to see whether that's a reasonable distance from me to visit. It's a 2-hour trek, unfortunately, but maybe I can go there one day. And yeah, Theo is right. I swim quite frequently in the river near Teddington Lock, so it's just upstream of the tidal limit bit. So I swim there with a small group of friends, and what we've seen over the past year or two is several other groups have started meeting in there or other spots just up and down this stretch of river. And people used to wait until it was 2 or 3 days of dry weather before getting in, but now I see people are getting in pretty much regardless. Sometimes it is the river does look quite unpleasant actually. So, there's scum on the surface. If you walk over the lock bridge, you can see there's a lot of scum where it gets churned up by the air. But other days it looks really clear and really nice, and it's quite inviting. So you see both extremes, and I think what Theo's point really is we would just love to actually know for sure, because we can see and we can make our own judgments, but we never know for sure whether it's safe to swim or not. And that data on are those CSOs spilling? There's a sewage treatment works up at Kingston spilling into the Hogs Mill, which flows into the Thames at Kingston. We know that spills quite a lot because we've seen the data from the Rivers Trust and their map, but we don't know when it's spilling. And it would just help so much to see that data. And I think it would help hold the water companies to account as well. If every time it was spilling, that was public knowledge, maybe a bit of naming and shaming would help increase the pressure on the politicians to vote for these amendments that we want them to.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Simon. And I should say that that as you've alluded to, I mean, the popularity of open water swimming has sort of gone through the roof, if that's not an inappropriate metaphor, over the last few months, really, with lockdown and access to indoor swimming spaces being restricted so much. So I think this really is an agenda that needs to be got to grips with, and CPRE London is trying to do what it can, working with organisations like Save Lee Marshes, for example, that have a campaign to create a wild swimming spot on the former site of the East London Waterworks off Lee Bridge Road, and we're very keen to help support those kinds of community-based initiatives. And we know that new swimming spots have been opened, open water swimming spots have been opened over the past few years. Beckenham Place Park, for example, has a swimming lake, and also the Royal Docks, of course, has been used by for open water swimming in recent years. So that's great. There's a question here on this topic really from Alex, who is asking about the Hampstead Ponds really, and he's saying, how can nature equality be guaranteed if green spaces and open water bathing spots are enclosed and commercialised, e.g. Hampstead Heath Pond since 2020? And he reminds us that the Hampstead Heath Act is supposed to ensure common law rights of free access, but a private member's bill in 2018 has allowed City of London as landlord to if you like, constrain those rights. I don't know if anyone wants to comment about Hampstead Heath Ponds, what's been going on there recently, or answer this question from Alex. Theo, do you know about this case?
Yeah, and I think that the Hampstead Heath, that whole sense of access to common land is something that we've kind of had strict promise over the centuries, and the sort of the cost of whether people can get in somewhere like Hampstead Heath Ponds shouldn't be dependent on being able to afford it. There are so few of these spaces that they're incredibly precious, and then given the fact that it has been closed twice over the last year because of sewage overflows, with the local sewer infrastructure not being able to cope, and pretty raw sewage, concentrated sewage ending up in the women's pond, that's not a combined sewer overflow. That is a failing of that infrastructure. So it seems a bit rich for ask people to make people pay when at the same time it does get polluted. I think we have to elevate the conversation to one where it's about increasing access, about public access being seen as that fundamental right, which goes wider into the amount of kind of land that we can access around the UK as well. And if we the smaller we make these spaces, the greater risk there is that they will get overwhelmed, and also that fewer people can enjoy them. So it's we need to be going in the opposite direction than making it harder to get people into these spaces.
Great, thank you. I'm looking at the chat panel now. We have another question from Catherine Kirkbride, who's asking about for Furze Farm, about who originally funded the Wetlands project and on what rationale. Are there financial benefits for the council or Thames Water, for example? And what about ongoing funding for the Wetlands and Park? Who is paying and why?
Thank you. I'll take that one if I can. So originally it was to do with the flood relief scheme. So the watercourses engineers from Enfield Council were working with Thames 21, and some of the funding had come from DEFRA, the Environment Agency. Thames Water, I think, summed up around 300,000 over the course of 2 or 3 years, and of course the council themselves. We instigated them getting 175,000 through the big green poll by supporting a bid that was written by the council, and then we got over 2,000 votes, the most they'd had at one of these funding bids with the big green poll, which secured the 175. As for revenue generating, well, they're going to make huge revenue savings through improved health of the community. Another money saving and revenue generating is the fact that it brings people, events, and increases sport for people and activities that again is of benefit to the council in terms of revenue, or can be. We work very closely with the council for Furze Farm, still with the watercourses engineers and the parks and properties people. Future funding, we are always looking at future funding to improve and develop Furze Farm for the benefit of the community, with the permission and from the local authority. We're always happy to give more detailed case studies, and you can contact us direct if you'd like some further information on this.
Thanks, Toni. I think that illustrates how important it is, whilst we may have problems with some of these agencies, how important it is to work with them where we can to deliver outcomes of mutual benefit. I don't think we have any more questions specifically posed in the chat or the Q&A panel. We're at 2:15. We don't have to go on to 2:30, although we can do if we want to. I wonder whether any of the speakers would like to make a concluding comment before we wrap up. But if anyone has any questions, please do. Now's your final chance, really, to post them in the Q&A panel. So I'm going to go through, invite the panelists in the order that we heard from them, first of all, to perhaps say a few concluding remarks about perhaps focusing on you know, what is the next step that we should all be thinking of taking in order to improve access to clean and safe water in London for health and well-being purposes. Kate, can I ask you to share your final thoughts?
Absolutely. I suppose my final thoughts are that the situation we're in right now, we've seen it at various points in the past, and you know, we shake our head at what were they thinking back then, how could they have got themselves into such a state, and you know what, it's the same patterns of behavior that keep repeating themselves. We really have to learn from where we've gone wrong in the past, and I think we kind of need to go way back when into living far more symbiotically with nature, with respecting the balance of nature, and also not seeing it as an inconvenience, something that gets in the way of modern life, but rather how can we work alongside it? How can we give it equal presence within the city alongside us? Because I'm not sure what our future is if we continue along the path that we seem set upon.
Thank you. That's a very, very important point. And actually, it reminds me just to mention very briefly the work that CPRE London have been doing in coalition with 18 other environmental NGOs in London to promote the idea of a more natural capital, which we've been promoting in the run-up to the mayoral elections earlier this year and beyond. If you want to find out more about the More Natural Capital Coalition, you can check it out on our website. Which really reflects the point I think Kate was making. We need to be working more in harmony with nature than in the opposite direction. Okay, so thank you, Kate, for that. I think it was Grant next, wasn't it? Grant, do you want to share your final thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I really do agree with what you just said, Kate, to be honest. I think that harmonic relationship with nature, well, we're part of nature, so we should just acknowledge that a bit more, I think. But also really just how inspiring sort of the work that Toni and Helen, you've been doing. I think that's just, you know, when you're making it practical, you know, it's not something that, you know, we look at very high level stuff, look at the data, how the data can inform, but you're actually helping build the communities that change these places for the better. And I think that's just really inspiring. So I really do want to sort of kind of, it's just inspiring to try and see if we can find some places near me that you can do a similar thing and create that connection with the environment and care for it as well. And also the work that you're doing, Theo, as well. I think just allowing people the information to make the right informed decision. I think, Simon, you mentioned that as well. It's so important. So I'm really inspired by zooming into some of the practical aspects of how we interact with water bodies. So yeah, thanks for everyone for the talk today and the questions as well.
Thank you, Grant, and we look forward certainly to continuing to work with Tranquil City on this important agenda. Toni, Helen, do you have any final thoughts to share?
Yes, please. We do agree with all that's been said by both Kate, and thank you very much, Grant, for those kind words as well. We think it's terribly important that key stakeholders and community, especially community, work together and are listened to, but also it's about working with local campaigners to deliver these kind of spaces that are going to be fit for purpose. The community are the ones that use them, and their voice is so important, or we believe it has been from our experience. And we are going to continue to drive forward with our community hub, working with business to make sure that it's sustainable for the future, and continue to, one gap that we feel that there is still quite key is about training. So these spaces are created and you bring in community to help to drive forward community use. But we still feel that we have gaps in terms of getting volunteers trained so that they can continue to do the the work that we are doing, and it's also about succession planning for the future. If that makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely, no, really, really important points, and I think all credit to the work of Friends of Firs Farm, but also all of the other Parks Friends groups across London that do so much fantastic work linking local communities with their local green spaces. Fantastic. Yes, and so Theo, a last word for you.
I suppose, I mean, rivers do so much for us. You know, I mean, they give us our drinking water, and they don't have a voice, but this week we can speak for them. We can say to our MPs, cherish us and treat us with respect, the respect that they deserve, I suppose.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Theo, and thank you again to all of our excellent panelists, and thank you to those of you who've attended. As I said at the outset, what we perhaps lack in quantity, we've made up for certainly in quality with some fantastic questions and contributions from attendees. I'm really keen that we try and keep this agenda going. So I'm really keen to talk to all of the panelists again about how we might work together in future on this agenda. And also to anyone else that wants to get in touch with us at CPRE London. My name again is Neil Sinden, so you can get me at neil@cprelondon.org.uk. I put various links in the chat for those that are interested, including links to the other events that we and others are organising as part of London Rivers Week this year, including the webinar tomorrow lunchtime on restoring London's rivers, but also a fantastic London Rivers Book Club session on Wednesday evening, which I would recommend to all of you. Thank you again. We're finishing a little bit early. I hope that's okay. Give you all time to have some lunch, I guess, and hopefully see you again at one of these events. Thank you and goodbye. Oh, by the way, I should say that the session has been recorded, or at least most of it's been recorded. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to work out how to put it onto a YouTube channel so that, and we'll send a link round so that you can access it and send it on to contacts and other people that might find it of interest. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.